Ritchie Torres, you know, he is a Democrat politician from New York, and he is one that I tried to warn people about before. I believe he is on track to become the next Hakeem Jeffries if, you know, he plays his cards right, and so far he's playing them right. He is another one that is very pro Israel, the state of Israel. He doesn't hide that. He checks off a lot of the boxes that the Democratic Party likes to boast about. He's a minority. He's Afro, Latino. He is came from a working class family, worked his way up. That story that they like to tell. He checks off those boxes. But Ritchie Torres, even though they claim that he's progressive, and by they, I mean the New York Times, they wrote a whole article about him, that he is the progressive that we need to look towards. That's what the New York Times was saying. Ritchie Torres has proven himself to be just as very much corporate and corrupt as the other establishment Democrats in office. Now, I've been waiting for this. I've been waiting for someone to confront him, to challenge him on his views about foreign policy, to challenge him on his views about all this money that's going to Ukraine. And Jose and his friends have done just that. Now, for people who feel that these confrontations have been rude, I don't feel like this was rude at all. I felt like this is probably the most calm that I've seen. So if anybody is speaking badly about this one, I'd raise my eyebrows a little bit. So Jose had some things to say about Ritchie Torres. Let's go ahead and get into it. There's multiple clips for this. We're going to get started with the first one.
Cy Hirsch just released the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You weren't briefed on that. Why not? Are you going to put a congressional probe into that? Yes or no? Because this ain't no ordinary journalist. You know that.
So,
I want to hear what he has to say.
Nord Stream is a pipeline that transfers oil from Europe, particularly Germany. I'm sorry, from Russia to Germany. So we don't have the authority to investigate pipelines.
All right, come on. Now that's bullshit. You know that. Victoria Nuland herself says she's happy that it's a pile of metal underwater. Do you share her sentiment?
Here's what we know. The Europeans are conducting an investigation.
They investigated.
And it is true.
Why did Joe Biden say that we are going to get rid of the Nord Stream pipeline? And when asked, but wait a minute, that's run by Gazprom in Germany, how are you going to do it? He said,
we'll be able to do it.
Remember that? Video doesn't disappear. Remember that? Okay. Listen to what listen to what Ritchie says.
Definitive evidence.
Yeah, we do. It's called Cy Hirsch.
Then produce the evidence.
He already did.
Okay, this talking point right here, he said, we need evidence. And he said, we have it, Cy Hirsch. And he said, produce the evidence. This is what they do when they don't want to answer the question. You see, he's trying to challenge Jose to say, okay, well, show me the evidence. Do you have evidence? Produce the evidence so that he doesn't have to answer the question about Joe Biden saying, we're going to take care of it. That's what they'll do. He's trying to deflect because he doesn't want to have to criticize President Biden. That's what this is about. Let's go on.
Produce the evidence. Read the article.
Listen, this is Cy Hirsch. This is the My Lai massacre. Okay, this is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist.
The My Lai massacre was from Vietnam, for those who are not aware, during the Vietnam War. So Cy Hirsch, I've covered him before on this show. I think it was last week I covered him on this show, where we went over some of his accomplishments. Like, this guy is not just your everyday journalist. He's very well accomplished. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He did uncover that story during the Vietnam War. And he also covered Richard Nixon. And he was the one who uncovered the fact that Richard Nixon was abusing his wife. And I played that clip on here as well. So let's go on.
He is not going to publish something he can't prove. So unless you're naive enough and you don't know that, I'm here to inform you. I'm at least asking for congressional inquiry into whether or not it's true, because his credibility alone should prompt that, don't you think?
The Europeans are conducting an investigation.
We know the United States did this.
It seems like you know the answer to the question, so there's no need to move.
Well, what are you gonna do? I'm your
Answer
constituent.
your question.
I'm your constituent. I want you to actually do something about it.
I'm going to try to answer your question once more, and then I'm going to move on. The Europeans are conducting.
That's a non-answer. What are you doing? Because if the United States did this,
Notice, I want you to pay attention to the nonverbal cues, okay? Because nonverbal behavior is important. And I'm going to pause it right at that part. Watch this.
Your question once more, and then I'm going to move.
Look at Ritchie Torres' hand. You see this thing with the pointing? Kamala Harris does this too. They do that. That whole talking point thing. Pay attention to those nonverbal cues. You know what he's doing when he does that, right? That's his way of trying to tell you, I'm actually trying to explain what is going on. So now you're looking at his hand, except for Jose. Most people, you're going to be paying attention to his hand instead of paying attention to what he's actually saying. Let's go on.
The Europeans are conducting.
that's a non-answer. What are you doing? Because if the United States did this, you have to hold them accountable. Listen, we are on the verge of a nuclear war right now. I don't think you know that, and if the people here don't know that, they should. You talk a big game about the Bronx. You talk a big game about a lot of things, but guess what? None of it's going to matter if we're all dead. Think about that for a second, right? You are leading us into a nuclear war. What's happening in Ukraine directly affects what's happening here. You don't think you're going to get us into a nuclear war? Is exactly how we get into a nuclear war. Now, as your constituent, I demand that you stop funding the Ukrainians. I understand that you're also an Israeli lobby plant.
And this is where he brings up the state of Israel. So that's the thing. Jose is asking Ritchie, what are you going to do? He's not asking him if Europe is conducting an investigation. He's asking, what are you going to do? You are my representative and I am your constituent. What are you going to do about this? And Jose isn't answering that question. He keeps repeating the same thing. Europe is doing an investigation. You know what that means? That means that Ritchie is repeating the same thing, that Europe's doing an investigation. So that means that Ritchie isn't going to do anything.
Look, how can you deny what's happening to the Palestinians, but you can defend what's going on in Ukraine? And now you're trying to erase their history.
That is a golden question. Because if you say that the Ukrainian people, we have to protect them, we have to save them, why don't you have that same sentiment in reference to the Palestinian people? Why don't you think we have to save them and protect them? That's a golden question. I like the fact that Jose linked the two because it shows the hypocrisy of the politicians that we have in DC. Why are you willing to protect one group but not another group of people? I think we know the answer to that question, right? It's because the United States government has business dealings with the state of Israel. We do have business dealings with them. But of course, Ritchie isn't going to say that. Joe Biden isn't going to say that either.
You are the biggest fraud. You think George Santos is a liar? You're the biggest fraud here.
Okay, that's part one. Here's part two. Now, this is Jose's friend. Now, notice it starts off, I'll address you respectfully. Listen to this.
I'll address you respectfully. My colleague, when he brought up the Seymour Hersh article, which said that the United States was responsible for the destruction of the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines, I'm going to be honest, it didn't seem like you knew about it, which is a concern because Seymour Hersh, if you didn't know, this is one of the most decorated journalists in all of America.
I'm familiar with Seymour Hersh, yes.
He broke the story.
I'm familiar with the article. And if Seymour Hersh...
When someone like him is saying something like that, it has to be taken seriously. And right now, there has been absolutely no mainstream coverage of that article. And
So now Ritchie Torres admits that he has seen the article. But when Jose was questioning him about it, he was acting like he didn't know about it. So now he's admitting. So I don't know if he was lying the first time or he's lying this time. But this piece here, mainstream coverage of that article, that's another thing too. Mainstream media has been trying to bury that story. The only articles that I've seen about it, I think I presented one of them on the show here, where they said that the White House had responded and they said that is complete. I'm not going to do it. It is utterly false and complete fiction. That was the White House response in reference to that article. I kid you not. But for the most part, mainstream media is not talking about it at all. And I'm pretty sure they've already received their cues from production and from the producers letting them know, don't you cover that story.
They're trying to bury it, you know? And another thing, I mean, the Bulletin of Atomic Sciences just said that we're now 90 seconds on the brink of midnight. We're the closest that we've ever been to a thermonuclear war. And listen, I get what you might think about what's going on in Ukraine. It's a tragedy. But the only way to save Ukrainian lives, to save Russian lives, to save everyone's lives is to actually push for negotiations. Because the war in Ukraine cannot be won. Over 100,000 people have died in Ukraine because we've been sending over $100 billion worth of arms over there to push a conflict that can never be won. So I'm asking you, I'm sure you have a conscience, to actually lobby in Congress to start negotiations, to stop the brink towards nuclear war.
The longer it continues, the longer this war continues, the more people die. That's just a reality. And it's not just this war, it's any war. It's just a reality of the situation. So he's asking Ritchie to basically rally his comrades and ask them to push for negotiations. I don't think that is unreasonable, you know?
Because frankly, all these other local issues, they may be important, but the most important issue of all of humanity is stopping nuclear war. I want you to make a commitment to that, because I believe you have a
Thank you.
Listen to all the people clapping. So you see, this is different from before, because some of the other, confrontations that they've done, it was just them clapping. But now you have other people clapping along with him. So I sincerely hope this means that more Americans are starting to wake up to this conflict with Russia and Ukraine. Let's go on.
No one wants nuclear war. So I've addressed this issue. There's no answer that I can give you that's going to satisfy you. My view is Vladimir Putin chose to invade a sovereign nation state. He has committed atrocities, crimes against humanity. We are holding him accountable.
If NATO didn't
but we are not
for
directly
the past 30 years, if we actually accepted Putin's security guarantees, which you wanted, we would not be in this conflict right now. So that's not, what you're saying, Putin started it, that's a lie. NATO and the US started it.
This is the piece that politicians, that our congressmen and women leave out. This piece right here, what he just said about NATO and about the US, they leave out the part that they were provoked. They leave that piece out. Now, some will hear that and still say that Russia was wrong to invade. But I also think that this piece of information is crucial. Do you know how many people I've spoken to outside of this space, of course, that don't know about this piece? Do you know how many people I know, like friends of mine, former coworkers, they don't know anything about this part. And that's because mainstream media repeats State Department, excuse me. They repeat the State Department talking points. So whatever the State Department says, that's what mainstream media is going to say. That's why most people I speak to outside of this space don't know about that piece right there. Let's go on.
Russia taking money from corporations? Are you willing to stop Russia?
Let him answer.
This woman right here, I don't know if you heard what she said, but she was asking Ritchie if he was willing to stop taking money from corporations. I told you. See, anybody can say they're progressive. Any politician can say they're progressive now. It doesn't mean anything anymore. Bernie Sanders is making excuses for Pete Buttigieg not doing his job. Don't believe me? Look on Twitter. He's making excuses for Bernie Sanders' response was he driving the train? You see? It doesn't mean anything anymore. So that's what she was asking him. I thought that was an important piece. And I also want you to reflect on the people in the room. Notice, once again, a lot of times at these meetings, most of the people that attend, it's usually older people. I would like to see more younger people. I would like to see more millennials, more Gen Z going to these town hall meetings, talking to their representatives, because you know why? It's your future. It's your future. You're the ones that are going to be affected by climate change. You're the ones that are going to be affected. So I really would like to see you guys go to some of these town halls. I really do. Let's go on.
We disagree. We disagree. I think we.
On stopping
There's not going to be nuclear war. We are exhausting every means. We're not directly intervening. We're not directly combating Russia. We're helping. Let me finish. We're helping the Ukrainians. We're helping the Ukrainians help themselves.
Even though they're dying, even though they're still dying.
That's it. Right? We're
approaching negotiations.
If Vladimir Putin were willing to negotiate for peace, then that would be wonderful.
Wasn't he trying to do that in the beginning? See, this is the talking again. This is another talking point that they're doing. Notice how he said, well, if he was willing to negotiate, wasn't he trying to do that in the beginning? Ritchie Torres isn't going to say that. You know who else? AOC is not going to admit that. Bernie Sanders isn't going to admit it. None of them will admit it. Terrible. This is terrible.
You're lying.
Okay, that's part 2. Here's part 3. Now, this one is in reference to Palestine. So listen to this.
So you said ethnic cleansing and genocide against the Palestinians. Let me. Can I answer your question? Okay. Can we all agree? Can we all agree? Well, can we all? No, please, sir.
David, let her speak. She has the right to participate.
Can we all agree that when there's ethnic cleansing or genocide, there tends to be depopulation? Is that right? If you commit genocide against the people,
There's something about the Palestinian terrorists.
Please.
the Palestinian population in Israel has gone from somewhere in the range of 200,000 in 1948 to over 2 million in Israel, and then overall it's about 14 million. And that's based on numbers that have been reported by the Palestinian Authority. So if there were genocide, there would not be a surge in the Palestinian population. There would be a systematic depopulation.
All right, we're going to come back to this, but I do want to show you something really quick. I wish there would have been some type of PowerPoint at that meeting. Let's look at the actual map. Let's see what's happened. See if I can make this a little bit bigger for you guys because it does that. Crap. Can I do it here? View image. You're not going to do this for me? Why is it taking me there instead of to the image? Sorry. I clicked view image, not view page. But I think it's still, and this time I clicked view page, but now it won't show me the image. All right, anyway, we're going to do the best that we can with a screenshot. Look at this, guys. Look at it. So what you see here, I want to make sure you understand what's going on in this picture. 1946. The green is Palestine. The yellow is Israel. 1946, the majority of the region is Palestine. As we go on, look at this. Moving on. UN partition plan 1947. Notice the green patches are smaller now. You see that? The yellow is increased. 1967. Again, the green, West Bank, smaller. Here's Gaza right here, over here to the strip. I hope you guys can see my little pointer. Now, current, present day. Look at the little green, just green speckles here. And then there's Gaza there, and the rest is all Israel. So, what is Ritchie talking about? See the problem? Let's go back.
This is not a debate. This is me answering your question.
I need to be able to respond to anything that I realize is wrong.
Okay, well, you're entitled, you and I can have a private conversation,
No,
but
we should have it here.
I want to answer your question. So you brought up Iron Dome. It is true that we fund Iron Dome technology. Iron Dome is defensive, not offensive technology.
It is defensive.
Let me finish the answer.
Let him finish, please.
Iron Dome does not attack anyone. It protects civilians from rocket fire. Right? And I will not apologize for supporting technology that protects civilians from rocket fire.
It does both. It does both. It is, if you look up the definition, if you Google it, let's see. Because this is something, I know we talked about this before on RBN. I think it was last year we had this discussion. And it's defined as is a mobile all-weather air defense system developed by Rafael Advanced Defense. But what it doesn't, it tells you, like, you really have to look into it. I think this is the piece. Yes, this is the piece. I'll come back to it. Let me finish this clip and then I'm going to show you. There's an article that explained exactly what it does.
That is a position that I proudly take. I want to be clear. And so I'm going to move on because I answered your question.
They called me, so give me my minute.
Jackie.
Thank you.
That's it, it's over. You have your time.
Ritchie is not having a good day. Part 4. Again, this is Miguel and Bronx Greens asked the important question, why send so much money to Ukraine when we live in the poorest district in New York? So this is, I believe Ritchie's district is the Bronx, part of the Bronx, right? So really quick though, let me answer that question because I want to show you what it does. Now this article, and Eric, once I link this here, put this link in the chat for people because I want people to be able to refer back to this article when they're questioned about this. This is the same article that I went over last year, and it's called 5 Things You Need to Know About the Iron Dome Defense System and Who Voted Against It. Let me make it bigger. I'm not going to read the entire article, but I just want to go to this piece here. Let me go down here. Make sure I'm going to the right part. Oh, that's who voted for it. We already know about that. And then what did system? Okay, it's the part up here. What is Iron Dome and how does it save Israeli and Palestinian lives? It is an air defense missile system developed by 2 Israeli firms with support from the U.S. emphasis on defense. It is never used to attack or retaliate and poses no threat to Palestinians. The strongest air defense system in the world has 3 components, yada, yada, yada. According to Israeli officials, it is about 90% effective in stopping short-range rockets fired by Hezbollah terrorists next door in Lebanon or Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists in neighboring Gaza. The system protects Israelis of all backgrounds and faiths. See this? Then it goes on to say, for example, when Hamas and Islamic Jihad fired more than 4,300 rockets from Gaza into Israel this past May, more than 1,500 targeted heavily populated areas, including Israel's largest city, Tel Aviv. Iron Dome shot down more than 90% of those rockets, greatly reducing the death toll. Even with the Iron Dome, about a dozen Israelis were murdered. That number would have been much higher without it. Now, it goes on to say here, it also saves Palestinian lives, giving Israel a viable option to defend itself, shifts its focus from a strategy of preemptive offenses against terrorists who hide among tightly packed civilian areas to defense system that intercepts real and present danger. Notice how when they say here it is again, giving Israel the viable option to defend itself. But where is the viable option for Palestine and Palestinians to defend their self? Notice how it says it also saves Palestinian lives, but they're not able to give you a number for that the same way they were able to give you a number for the number of Israeli lives that it saves. Pay close attention to those types of things. And it talks about why the U.S. funds it. And then it went on to explain who voted for it and who voted against it. Yeah, this was the one that AOC was crying over. Remember that vote when she started crying? That was the one. So if she felt like she was doing, if it was a good thing, such a good thing that Ritchie describes, then why was she crying over her vote? All right. Let's go back in. And I believe this is the last one where they talk about the money that's not being spent in the Bronx.
Wait. So I just want to say I think you've been taking a lot of criticism tonight. You haven't run away. You've answered every question. But I really want to know, why have you given the okay to fund Ukraine with $110 billion?
We go back to Ukraine again.
Which should be helping the homeless, helping Medicare for all, doing all of those things. Why are we funding a war when that money should be at home? And we only know that 30% is actually being used in the war. We don't even know where a lot of the money is actually going to.
That's right, because remember, the Pentagon didn't pass their audit. So he's correct.
So I just want to know, why do you feel like it's okay to $110 billion for a war instead of putting that money back home, especially in a district where it's one of the poorest districts in New York City. District 15. I'm one of your constituents. I live on Valentine Avenue, and it's one of the poorest districts in New York City. So I want to know.
Yeah, and Richie's not poor anymore. That's part of the problem. Ritchie is not poor anymore. Yes, he grew up, poor with a single mother, but Ritchie is not living that life anymore, even though he's your representative.
Why do you feel like it's okay to do that, but not put the money back into?
You're gonna let me answer the question? It's a fair question, and not everyone agrees. But my view is the United States. We are the wealthiest country in the world. We are the most powerful country in the world. We are the most powerful country in the world. And with power comes responsibility. And if there is a...
You're quoting Peter Parker. Peter Parker. With great power comes great responsibility.
war criminal, who is invading sovereign nation states and murdering civilians, we have an obligation to respond. Just like when Hitler invaded sovereign nation states and systematically murdered people and committed ethnic cleansing and genocide, the world had an obligation to respond. And that's just my belief. There are some people who feel like we should mind our business, we should turn a blind eye. I don't believe that.
That still didn't answer his question about why there isn't money being put into the communities here in the United States. That didn't answer his question about why not use money towards Medicare for all and the homeless issue in this country. That still did not answer his question.
How about accountability?
Raise your hand, raise your hand.
No, that is fair. That is fair. That is fair. That is fair. That is fair.
Why did you vote against it?
So that is fair. So if the question is, should there be more oversight over how those dollars are spent, that is a completely fair point.
Well, why did you vote against it? Why didn't you vote?
You had to say no.
Because if we were to deny Ukraine aid, Ukrainian people would be slaughtered by the way.
So what he is essentially telling you is that it is more important to help them than to help our own people. I mean, I don't know how else to put it to you, but that's essentially what he's saying without saying those words. It is more important to help them than to help our own people. In one of the poorest districts in New York. This is who they voted in. Ritchie talked a good game when he was running. He's not one of them anymore. He's no longer Ritchie from the Bronx.
You gotta let them no speaking out loud. You gotta reach out this and that.
That's it.
You know my view, so.
Let us ask a question.
Ask your question. Ask your question.
Probably.
Go ahead.
Whoo. I would not want to be in that hot seat. Didn't answer the question, though. Did not answer the question. That's right, Kill Your Gorgers. They all talk a good game at the start, Sabby. That's right. That is right. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Thank you, Joe. My lie is pronounced me lie. Thank you. Thank you for that. Thanks for the super chat, Frank. Wow, Ritchie is quiet here, but he was loud when he said good riddance to defund the police. Yes, he was. I remember that. I remember that. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Ritchie, that is utterly false and complete fiction. Robert, anyone remember the missile attack on the news building not too long ago and the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh? Yes. Yes, I vaguely remember. At kids, Sabby, anyone who doesn't see the inequalities between how and the Israeli government systemically attacks and the 187 of innocent Palestinians is lying. That's right. Like there's no match there. It's not a fair fight. The Jammin, Ritchie with the bag now. Yes, he's Ritchie with the bag now.